Companies are increasingly gathering more and more information about us when we go online as a way to develop more sophisticated advertising and marketing campaigns. The idea is that if a company can compile more information about our consumer habits and interests, then that provides a company with more information so that they can market specific products that are targeted to our own particular interests and preferences. Now, this has raised a lot of social issues about whether or not this gathering of information by these companies is unethical, is it intrusive, and should there be any limits on it? That companies gather information on users through data mining, through the use of cookies, through invasive spyware, it's raised questions about what should be done about that. And the authors talk about one specific proposal that's been embraced by some consumer activists. They argue that internet sites should be required to implement what are called opt-in strategies, which is essentially saying that the website has to get permission from anybody visiting their site to gather information on them, that users have to agree to opt in to this process of data gathering from this site, and that some consumer activists argue that this would be a much more ethical way to handle this problem of the data mining of users. Now, companies themselves don't like that marketing companies, advertisers, and internet sites really don't like this whole idea of opt-in policies. Instead, they prefer what are called opt-out policies, which is essentially the reverse of opt-in policies. Opt-out policies would be where individual users of a site have to specifically contact the internet site and say, hey, I don't want you gathering any information about me through cookies or other means. So basically, opt-out policies put the burden on the user to get the internet site to not gather information. So companies actually prefer that opt-out policy rather than the opt-in one. Which one do you think is preferable? Or do you have other ideas about how to handle this problem, if indeed you think it is a problem? Now, advertisers and businesses are not the only parties that are gathering information about people that visit sites online. Instead, the U.S. government is also playing a very active role in conducting surveillance on people that use the internet. The U.S. government gathers much information about people that visit online sites, and it also intercepts a great deal of electronic online communication between people online, such as email, postings on Facebook, and so forth. While the U.S. government has always played a role in terms of conducting surveillance to some extent, the government really expanded its role after the events of 9/11. After that horrific act of terrorism, the U.S. government passed the Patriot Act that greatly expanded the authority of the U.S. government and law enforcement agencies to conduct surveillance on Americans suspected of terrorist activity. Now, some critics have argued that increasingly the U.S. government has really overreached and conducts lots of surveillance on people's online habits and online use that are not conducted to acts of terror or suspicion of terror. It raises questions about how much reach and authority should the U.S. government have to gather information about people's internet usage, and how much authority should the government have to continue to conduct the surveillance on Americans suspected of terrorist activity or of crimes. I think on a larger level, that this issue addresses a conflict between two priorities and two principles that we value in society. On the one hand, we value our right to privacy as Americans. We value our right to be left alone and to live our lives without interference or intrusion by the U.S. government. But that right to privacy is sometimes in conflict with an equally valuable principle of national security, that we value the right of the government to keep us safe from people that want to do us harm, such as suspected terrorists. So this issue, I think, comes down to how do we as a society best balance these two competing goals? How do we balance the right to privacy with the need for national security and for the government to keep us safe? And do government actions like the Patriot Act, do they strike a good balance between these two principles? Or do they sacrifice too much of our right to privacy? So that's an issue I want you guys to consider. Another important social issue related to the internet has to do with the content that is available online. And is this content that is available on internet sites appropriate or inappropriate? Should we, as a society, limit what types of content is allowed online, or should there be certain restrictions for certain kinds of sexually explicit material that are out of bounds? And who should have access to the internet and material online? And should there be certain restrictions for certain vulnerable groups, such as children or young people? As the internet has developed, there are sites that feature very extreme forms of violence, and a number of critics have called attention to the growth of sexually explicit material online, the growth of online pornography, and some scholars and critics argue that we have to really be concerned about young people's use of the internet. Should we restrict or limit young people's access to the internet in the name of protecting them from the harmful effects of being exposed to too much violence or too much sexually explicit material? And over the years, as we've seen more extreme content online, more graphic sex and violence, there have been louder voices by political groups and churches and other commentators saying that certain content should be restricted or certain content should not be permitted online. And Congress has, over the years, struggled to come up with policies or rules to protect children from what they see as inappropriate content online. A couple of laws passed by Congress that the chapter talks about were ruled unconstitutional. However, one congressional act that was passed was the Children's Internet Protection Act of 2003. This was an attempt, again, to kind of protect young people and children against being exposed to inappropriate material online. This act requires public schools and libraries to use filtering software like NetNanny to limit minors' exposure to inappropriate internet content, right? So that libraries and public schools, they have to have some of this software that prohibits young people from going to certain sites that are designated as inappropriate for them. Now, I guess, just to add my 2 cents about this, these filtering software programs are far from perfect. That the programs tend to filter out lots of sites that might actually be very helpful for young people. So, for instance, any kind of sites that have information about safe sex practices or about about the human body, that all of that is largely banned. And also there's questions about who's going to make the decisions from this software about what is appropriate or inappropriate content, what settings are going to be used, and does that present any problems as well? Right? For instance, let's say that the person working at the library is a fundamentalist Christian that has strong anti-gay views. So does that mean that the filtering software is going to have a setting that prohibits access to any sites that even mention gays or lesbians in society? So again, lots of questions here about does this software work? Who's going to make decisions about what is appropriate or inappropriate? And what is the appropriate role of government in making these kinds of decisions and regulating the internet? And actually, to the second point on this slide, some people in society argue that the internet should be completely unregulated. Some argue that there is no appropriate role whatsoever for the government to make decisions about what content is acceptable or unacceptable, and that the government really has no legitimate role in terms of making decisions about who should have access to the internet and who should not. What do you think about this issue? Should the government have a role in protecting children? What should that be? And should the government develop policies about what kind of content is or is not acceptable? Tough questions, but they are things that as a society we do need to address.